I'm going to do my best to project, but welcome to the Matronage Salon, our sort of shrine to female creativity. We've got works, basically everything in this space is work by women artists. The work on the walls curated by Loft Projects, the beautiful design objects that we've got around, and then the women-owned publishing company, Bond and Grace, who is displaying their beautiful art books that are commissions by women artists illustrating classic novels that we all know and love. So I'm so pleased to be here with the two of you, Future Fair's own. I would love to I really want this to be like a wide-ranging conversation focusing on the state of women in the arts in 2025, a reflection on how far representation has come, and the ways in which we still have a long way to go. And both of you are very committed in your respective galleries to representing women, and I would love to know the origin of that. I mean, we've got two, PPOW founded, 30 plus years ago?
44.
44, sorry.
44.
And Destinee's gallery, Ross-Sutton Gallery, which was founded
5 years ago.
5 years ago. So we've got a little bit of a timeline, but I would love to hear about whether the founding ethos of the gallery was to support women, or if it just sort of happened to be that way.
I think supporting women is something that has always just been natural to me. I am in a very large family. I have 6 sisters.
Mm-hmm.
So
one of whom is here, I think?
Yes, one of my sisters is here. And I've been surrounded by feminine energy my whole life, in all different facets. And so to me, kind of going out into the world and seeing that these fascinating stories of all kinds were things that are kind of being pushed to the side in favor of the usual kind of what we see, especially in the art world. I wanted to tell stories that I felt like weren't getting enough light, and women's stories were just naturally part of that. And so it wasn't intentional in the sense that, I sat down and wrote that this was going to be it. It was just a natural part of like my personal ethos.
Mm-hmm. And PPOW, which was co-founded.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak, hopefully I'm speaking loud enough, but I'll speak to PPOW and its founding, and then I'll speak to like my own relationship to it. But thinking about Penny and Wendy when they opened it in '83 when they were 26, and I was thinking about that a lot. It's exactly the same thing. Like, it's not like they wrote a manifesto with like their goals. They wanted to show it's just like a natural thing about what they liked and what they felt they related to. And at that time, they were not seeing a lot of things they were relating to. So that's where it's more of a natural sort of evolution where you're gravitating toward things that are touching you, you're relating to, moving you, and then you want to support those things that have moved you so much. And if you're in an environment where you're not relating to anything you're seeing or what's popular, you end up wanting to move towards, what you feel is important in the moment. And another aspect of that was in the East Village at the time, there was a lot of galleries coming into the East Village and showing a lot of artists who weren't living in the East Village. They were kind of coming in, opening, and bringing in a lot of work that wasn't part of like the daily life there. So they really showed artists who were who lived there. And those happened to be a lot of women and queer community and non-white communities, a huge Puerto Rican, and immigrant has a huge, also my mother I'm a 4th generation New York Jew, so having that connection, there's so many immigrant histories there that are so layered. And they really wanted to be integrate in that community and show art by artists who are working there instead of like bringing in outsiders, because of the setting is cool and it was inexpensive. So that's also a driving force, is really important, but that is also really still organic. And then for me personally, my mother's Wendy Alsop, and it took me a while to understand the honor of working for your mother in terms of like women supporting other women. And there's a lot of examples of like father and son businesses, or a daughter working for her dad, but it's a little bit less, I don't know the statistics, but there's not as many models or about daughters working for their mothers and believing in their mothers, and that female camaraderie and belief and wanting to honor what also two women at 26 did and are still doing together, because at the top are two women who are working collaboratively at the helm. And it's created a kind of different alternative environment than sort of the masculine prototype of business. And again, this is all like very organic. So I think that a lot of it is about women supporting other women, and that's kind of been the driving ethos and continues to be.
I think that's really beautiful. The honor of working for your mother. And I want to emphasize just how unusual it is. Both Ross-Sutton Gallery and PPOW are less than half approved, which means they're showing 50% or more works by women and non-binary artists. And that is very unusual. And that is, I mean, the statistics, if you're not familiar with them, are pretty dire. 15% of museum collections are works by women artists. 3% of the auction market is work by women artists. So it's the deck is stacked very much against women. In the gallery world, it's a little bit better. There's a lot of really exciting galleries some of whom represent only women artists, like Mariana does at Kaliner. Some are very much dedicated to the subject. But when you're at the top, the galleries like Gagosian Gallery represent about 25% women, and that's the biggest art gallery in really the world. So it's very unusual to have this kind of representation. But I would love to hear about your direct experiences with the artists in the galleries. Is it a different experience, fostering their careers and working with them? How does your support for women differ in any way, and how do you make sure that their careers are stewarded across time? Either of you can answer that.
I have to think of it.
So we show, our roster ranges from very emerging artists to more historicized artists. So I'm working with women in their 20s and women in their 80s. And it's definitely really interesting. Obviously, there's so many things that define what happens to you. But, a lot of the older women that I work with are really in their prime, like later in life. And they're extremely active. They're constantly making work. And they've had to weather through so much and be so unrespected and been through so much, they're getting their moment now, but it's still, not at the level of their male peers. And a
question I have, sorry to interrupt you, but a question I have is, what is the true feeling that a lot of these artists have when they finally get their retrospective at, 80? What are the emotions that artist feels,
Yeah, I think it's true elation and something they didn't think was imaginable, but there's also a lot of anger and a lot of anxiety because they are older and now they're like, wait, I'm 80. I have to now make all this work and show as much as possible because now people are paying attention. I only have this time left. So it's a mixture of intense gratitude, and so many people have been rooting for them over the years too, that there's a lot to celebrate, but there's also some anxiety that comes with your moment coming so late in your life, even though they're so active, but they're almost like, there's just a little bit of anxiety that comes along with.
I think that is, because when we in the press and when we hear about Carmen Herrera getting a retrospective at the Whitney at 100 years old, what we hear is just like, fantastic, celebrate, like this is wonderful. But we don't hear that other side, that the anxiety, the anger, the real physical limitations of an older woman artist. But I would love to hear.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to add on to that. I guess there's this, I have this feeling of finally, but almost like a sense of sadness, because it's like they should have had more time to enjoy this. Finally they're being appreciated, but we know it should have happened years, if not decades ago. There are so many artists that should have had more time to enjoy the fruits of their labor and their efforts. And, over time, that's just a story that I've enjoyed less and less, to be quite honest, because I want women artists to enjoy the extent of their career, as, especially if their work is incredibly strong, for as long as their male counterparts. Your first major show shouldn't necessarily be a retrospective. It should, we should learn from that, where it's, Carmen Herrera was, 100 years old. It's like, what other artists can we look at so we don't have to do that again, so we don't have to tell that story again? So I think that's another side that we need to kind of acknowledge a little bit more, or just, talk about it. The celebration is amazing, but that's not something I necessarily want to celebrate. I want to celebrate an artist sooner,
And are the artists that you represent, where are they in their careers?
A lot of the artists are quite emerging talents. Some of the artists, for example, I did a show in April of last year in Venice, and there were 34 women artists, and it was from all over the world, different religions, different classes, different countries. And the youngest was 25 at the time. The oldest just turned 90. And, her contemporaries of that time are, names that are solidly in the art canon. And that's kind of when I started asking myself that question, this work is amazing. I can see it, how it developed along with these other artists. What stops people from appreciating it? Because it's equally as compelling. The quality is absolutely amazing. What was the disconnect?
Do you have an answer? Do you have an answer for why some women who were, ought to be in the canon were literally right next to, married to, whatever, the people who are part of the canon? Why aren't they part of art history?
I don't know. There's obviously there's a couple answers to that, and I obviously don't know all of them. But one thing I was thinking about, and something with younger artists that you work with who are very emerging, we're still dealing with sexism and the way it plays out in insecurity and imposter syndrome, and not being able to say no, taking every opportunity, and not there's a certain, and this is something I deal with. I think a lot of women deal with this. It's a thing where it's I'm trying to help other women that I also work with to be ask for a raise. A lot of women are scared to ask for raises, and I kind of think it's the same. I was, and I'm coming from this as totally, I am that person too, and I think that, not saying, I think it's that the loudest person in the room it works, within this society, and I think a lot of people women are dealing with and it shouldn't be that way. This is just the paradigm, whatever, that we live in. But it's a lot of it is a confidence and being being demanding and being like an asshole, and that's something that like doesn't like necessarily come naturally also to the way where you've been expected to be also like as caretakers, and there's such great things about it that could be better, but I think that it has to do with how confident men can be, and you get what you want when, even if you're not even a great artist or a great person, by being a bully.
Yeah, I think that is true to a certain extent. I think in a lot of art history, I think misogyny, like straight up, had a lot to do with it. Just people saying purely women can't paint, things like that. So I think partially because I'm sure many of the older women artists that you work with, like, they are tenacious. It's actually unbelievable the level of sort of self-confidence that they've sort of.
Yeah.
Maybe that comes later.
Totally,
in life,
and I think the self-confidence is there in terms of your art, but it's like, I feel like I've been told that if I only had more confidence. I've never felt like I didn't have confidence, but it's more about like the outward projection of it or something, or how you're supposed to handle that. I'd hear that all the time. But I was like, I'm confident, but the way you're perceiving me as not being confident. And there's something maybe in that a little bit.
Right, where we judge things by a male sort of standard. I think this book is such a good one. It's about how the world is built for men, and therefore it's not deliberately excluding women, but it's really about that our standards are all male standards. So
right.
If we're judging people by that standard,
right,
and you're not male, then
yes.
it sort of falls on deaf ears in some ways.
Totally, and that also reminds me of also like supporting women gallerists and women curators, and those are the voices that are going to support female artists too. But it's also about getting the respect as like a female gallerist, where like I'm not wearing the suit and sneakers, but I can totally help you learn about this work and like tell you the price. Like, I know there's a man sitting next to me, but he actually doesn't work here.
I've definitely done that. Oh yeah.
Actually, my name is on the wall.
Yeah. I kind of have to I am Destinee
Ross-Sutton. Do people think Ross-Sutton is a person? And maybe a man? Or do you not get that?
That is likely what it is, actually. But yeah, there's always things. I started quite young as well. I really started curating a 23, 24 years old. So that contributes to it as well. But yeah, there's always this kind of that can't be the gallerist. There's a formula of how I see a gallerist, and you don't fit that. Yeah. So I'm gonna kind of look for who might be the gallerist, right. And there's a bit of a brief flash of surprise and shame mixed in there.
Right. And people desperately try to.
Yeah. And also I think talking about levels of confidence, sometimes it's kind of when you might simply state facts such as I am the head of this gallery, or I talk about the projects that I do. I still have to push back almost this fear of is this me just being confident in my work, or am I crossing a border into being full of myself or cocky or something like that, and then questioning why am I afraid of that?
Right.
There's so many people who there's always people who are incredibly loud, like you said, and people flock to them, and it may not be because of the quality of their work. It could be because of their confidence. Mm-hmm. And then the people who are, quietly doing the work and doing it very well don't always get that same, vote of confidence. So I still, like, to this day, you know, I've had like a friend like, don't be afraid to talk about the work that you've done.
Right.
You know, you've done it, so you can say you did it.
Right.
Don't be afraid
And
of,
that's not,
you know,
that's
coming
just
across
fact.
that. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it's yeah, it's interesting. I guess it is a bit of that imposter syndrome coming into play, but also, you know, getting rid of that fear of like, what if people think I'm too overconfident?
Right.
I have to like
Yeah.
definitely work on that.
Yeah. Everything's a work in progress, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the works and the work that you've brought to Future Fair, but also the work that you did curating Future Fair. You brought 2 women artists, and I mean, Future Fair is fantastic, and we're always here because it's a space where women artists are, the many galleries here are less than half approved.
Yeah.
There are many women being shown.
Yeah.
So, how had, when you were curating, maybe a similar question probably to the first one, but what kind of vision for the art, world at this moment did you want to set forth for both of you?
Well, I mean, what they do is that it's more like being on like the selection committee or something, where I was reviewing and sort of rating the booth applications and like giving my feedback. And something that I really like about this fair is that it's really about being supportive, and it's sort of like what you're doing for your artists who might be very young, and like giving them good advice early, so they like have that about like, because people come in like they really don't know anything, I don't know why they would, but really don't know anything about like the art world, and really need like good advice and like room to experiment. And I think that also goes, that's part of the, there's some very established galleries here, but some galleries are not, and maybe this is like one of the first fairs they're applying to, so it's not like there's an opportunity to like reapply, and you can take the feedback that I'm giving you and reapply and then get in, because this is your first time doing it, and it's like, oh, maybe this would be better as a 2-person booth or a solo booth rather than 5 things for this context, and like what will serve you better. And I think that's the type of thing that if you're going to be a gallery in the long, like these booth applications get more and more intense, and I think like learning and like it's the same way you're like helping out the artists that you're working with, like giving them a good footing when you're going into this industry that like can feel really unsupportive. And obviously wanting to like bring more like women voices into it in terms of like next generations of galleries, and what we want like the next generations of artists and galleries to sort of like look like. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I'll talk a bit about my booth.
Yeah.
So I'll talk a bit about my booth. So it features 2 artists, and it comes from an idea. A lot of my work is kind of like intuitive. Every once in a while, do I sit down and kind of think like, which direction do I want to go? I give myself options, but I go with what I feel is like the natural progression. So my booth is based on this idea that I've been playing with for the past year or so. There's 2 different artists, and they have something in common, whether it's their style of painting, their origin, their culture, but they have something that contrasts. So with these 2 artists, one is an artist from Berlin. She lives and works in Berlin, and her work is her process is very free-flowing, very intuitive. She doesn't do like preliminary sketches. It's really just like paint to canvas, and the source material is basically all from her mind. And so it's a very fun, open, raw process. And then the other artist is from Somaliland, and she was born after her family returned to Somaliland after civil war and civil unrest. And there was a power vacuum and it was replaced by Sharia law. And so she has to witness the women in her family adjust to this new dynamic under a much heavier patriarchal society. How they communicate with each other, how they view their own bodies, their own sexuality, how they connect with themselves. And so that's channeled through. So the stories are quite different, but the styles, the color stories, some of the painting styles are quite similar. And it's an idea that I've been playing with for a while. And I think over time, my focus shifts in different ways, but I've always looked for more women to work with. It feels quite refreshing to work with women, especially when they get to know each other. It came from this idea where two of the artists that were in the Venice show are Persian, and they just talked to each other and found that out, and they were just so excited. And I'm like, they have this culture in common, they have this origin in common, and their work couldn't be more different. One is a painter, and another one makes stained glass sculptures. And so I really thought, there's so many different facets of womanhood and how people think about these things that kind of expands it out beyond womanhood into humanity. And that's, really the goal there is to womanhood as an experience is something that many people share, but there's so many differences that can only be put under that bubble of just humans, basically. So
yeah, and that connection too, where I feel like a lot of artists in general can feel very isolated, and we've helped create because of the artists, some of the female artists we brought together, like Robin F. Williams and Elizabeth Glassner and Jessica Stoller, their feminist crit group was started because they met through the gallery. And then they all are best friends now, and they created a really important crit group because they needed feedback about their work, and they weren't really getting any feedback, and so they created this group, and now people know them a lot more now. But at the time it was we need feedback and people to talk to, and that camaraderie and not feeling alone. I feel it's very similar to bring people together.
Also, it's nice to get feedback that you don't have to kind of question, are you saying this because I'm a woman in a negative way? Are you being extra harsh with your criticisms because of this, because you have a preconceived idea? People don't want to have to hide behind pseudonyms all the time or hide behind pen names in order to get impartial feedback. So I think it's great.
Yeah. Totally. No, and there's such a strong history of feminist spaces, feminist AAR gallery in Dumbo is sort of a original sort of 1970s space.
And we showed Dottie Addy, who was one of the founding members of AIR. So she's still making work.
Amazing. But I think what you were saying, Destinee, about women's experiences being the experiences of humanity, I think that we get that so often. It's women's point of view, a woman's expression is niche. It's too personal. It's too emotional. It's a number of these words where it gets put into a category where great art is universal. It can be related to by everybody, but women's experiences are niche. So that way, in a very Linda Nochlin style, women's art can't be great, and that's obviously utter BS.
Or we don't understand it.
Right.
And it's messy.
Right, it's messy. Right, yeah. You just have to take one look at Beauty Chicago and their sort of performance pieces in the 70s. It's
exactly.
It's messy. And the eggs and the cow's blood and everything. It's maybe that's the point, and maybe that's okay.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But I think that when you look at art history and you don't see the work of women artists in there, it's like, what does this mean? Why, if art is what purports to be the a reflection of humanity and a reflection of the creative spirit, then why it's almost a lie by omission, not having their voices within it.
Totally. Yeah.
Maybe we can shift a little bit to talk about the work of, or not the work, the role of women collectors in the as supporters of women artists, and whether you found that to be true in your own galleries, or maybe you have, what does the proportion of support look like when it comes to the collectors of your artists?
I don't think I have any like direct statistics, but I do over time have made a little more of an effort, especially for young professional women. A lot of emerging artists, that's kind of the audience that I attract often as well. And I'm happy that that's kind of the pattern that I've been following. But from personal experience, especially starting out, it just felt like I could make a little more progress with women collectors. There's always kind of that, a bit of a joke where, a male collector says, let me ask my wife, it's likely a no. Yeah. But vice versa, usually it's a yes, because they see something in it. And sometimes I feel like I can get a little bit further. Starting out early, I felt less talked down to, where it was kind of okay, great, amazing, a woman who's showing art that I love, and just a direct point of wanting to connect, really. But yeah, it's been interesting. Every once in a while, I kind of have a moment where I stop and I'm going through the clients that I work with, and I'm do I see a disconnect with? Do I see a disconnect with women? Do I see a disconnect with Black collectors, with people of color? And how can I remedy that? Yeah. How can I reach out to that audience a little bit more to just have a little bit more of that focus? I think that's important to me. I have amazing conversations with the women collectors. One of them stopped by. She's been collecting work from me since 2020. And, we finally meet in person for the first time. And it was very nice to see somebody who's been there when, when nobody knew who I was or the work I did, and seeing somebody that just knew, and I'm being incredibly grateful for that kind of support.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I love women collectors so much, and it's in terms of sort of my generation too, or some of my very good friends now who are female collectors, it's hard. It's hard for them because they get kind of they come to us and they're oh, you guys are being so nice and respecting me and giving me sending me previews, and they don't necessarily get also the respect from other larger galleries sometimes, and not appreciated and not respected. One of a collector who's a good friend of mine, she's from Kuwait, and she's tiny. She's really, really short, and she's a huge collector. She's major. She's awesome. And I'll be with her in Basel, and there's all these tall men collector around, and I'm they're ignoring her. I'm this is the collector. This is the important. I know she doesn't look like it to you, but she's an awesome collector who is building a fantastic collection. And I see her not getting respected by the way she looks. and by being like down to earth and not wanting to also like be, you know, not in like whatever, she's just herself.
Same sort of thing. Like, you're not playing the game. You're not sort of like jostling for power, for
Yes.
you know, attention, or you're not, you know, bragging about what your most recent acquisition was.
No,
you know?
so low key, like, and that's just her. You know, that's her personality, and that's, you know, I'm not saying this is like, you know, saying that, like, I think any way anyone is great, but just especially being in a lot of places where there's like, you know, just like have literally like just trying to give her like a platform to be like, you know, not people thinking that like she's like one of the caterers.
Right. Well, I mean, I mean, it's very much what we want to do with Less Than Half, is to create, you know, a generation of women who collect and support the work of women artists. And at some point, if you create this, you know, ecosystem where women are supporting women, you know, women collectors are buying from women galleries who are supporting women artists, it's like you can create a market that exists sort of to the side of the current market, and it gets big enough, and you know, you sort of force people to pay attention.
Yeah. It's been some of like my like best like work relationships that have been like really amazing, and we've also like grown together too, and have created like very like profound relationships because we've both been like growing in our respective, you know, parts that we play. And then and I think it's also, it gets back to that, like women just, it's supporting other women instead of being like competitive or playing into some of these like, you know, sexist tropes in terms of
tearing other people down.
Yeah.
You know, sort of cattiness that is such a sort of corroding kind of stereotype.
Yeah.
That it doesn't have to be that way, and that it isn't a zero-sum game. I think people, when they think about, oh, well, if you know, give a retrospective to a woman artist, or give a, you know, exhibition to a woman artist, you're taking away a spot from a male artist.
Yeah, you definitely can't have two shows by a woman in a row.
Right. No,
that'd be crazy.
But that sort of thing, I mean, it's you know, to me, it just expands. It's greater than, you know, it's a more truthful portrait of what creativity looks like. But it's also, it's not a zero-sum game. Actually having diversity in your programming and your exhibitions and your museum is just creating a more dynamic story.
Yeah, way more interesting.
Yeah, way more interesting. And oh my God, I get so bored of all, like, how many Van Gogh shows can you do? Like, truly, it's the Van Gogh cypresses, Van Gogh, like, you know, whatever, you know, Dutch landscape. It's just like, there's space. There's space. If we can do 10 Van Gogh shows, we can do.
Exactly. It's the same thing. Like, sorry, so I'm talking like the books right now. It's like Shakespeare's not going anywhere.
Right.
If we add other books into the curriculum by women, it's not like their kids aren't going to read Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Like, he's safe.
Yeah. Exactly. It's such a fragile kind of approach to life and to what exists.
Yeah, and I think it's also like we have to kind of confront ourselves in a way where, like, when we think of a collector, knee-jerk reaction, what's the image in our mind? You know, it's not the collector that you work with, so it's like But once you kind of learn, it's like, oh, I have to change that.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to look at myself and question that. It's not always like the tall, imposing guy with the expensive watch, you know? It could be somebody that's just quietly collecting an amazing collection, you know? And I do that a lot. I kind of like sit back and I ask myself a lot of questions, like, am I making an assumption based on what this person looks like, or am I making an assumption, you know, based on something else? And you know, now if I am, it's like, okay, now you have kind of like open up and just be a little more, just give that opportunity for a blank slate. and then let them represent themselves.
Totally.
Instead of letting the bias represent them.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the fact that the word patron is like the neutral for what it is to support artists is so indicative of, okay, patron, yes, that actually is a gendered word. It does mean a man is a supporter of the arts.
Yeah.
And it's okay, that says everything.
Exactly.
Why isn't it a matron of art? Why isn't it a gender neutral term that sort of encompasses any supporter? But kings, emperors, popes. There's a lot of precedent for it. But changing it to my neutral is now going to be a short woman from Kuwait. That's
It's always the quiet ones, honestly, that just kind of like fly under the radar, and all of a sudden they're like, here's my collection, and you're blown away.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I think that's true, that there is like serious people are like so cool and chill about it. And I think that's just an indication that they know what they're doing.
Yes.
They have a perspective.
Yeah, and you can like learn, like I feel like Annie Wendy over the years like have learned also from collectors. Like they bring knowledge because they've been doing their own research on Martin Wong or Dave Wanarovich, or two of our dear like friends who are, they're awesome. They actually introduced Carolee Schneemann to us.
There you go.
So there is like, if they're really, really serious and they're like, they've done their research, and it is definitely, about like, you're kind of all in it for like for like love.
Yeah, and it's very clear. You know who those people are.
Yeah.
The people who are committed. I also wanted to touch on something you were talking about, engaging Black collectors, and I think that talking about in the context of this, intersectionality of representation across, not just artists but collectors, and making sure that again the full sort of creative story is being told. I wonder about each individually your approaches to making sure that the story you're telling is not a single note.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my kind of shift into working with women artists started because I wanted, more African women. I started, and most of my work was focused on artists within the African diaspora. And, it was 2020 and things were happening so fast at the time. And then, you finally get a chance to breathe, and, or maybe a collector's like, oh, do you have any, other African women artists? And you kind of stop and you're like, oh,
right.
I don't. So, it started there, and it was kind of like, these women have fascinating stories. I have, a couple friends who they work in fashion, and their whole idea is bringing the production factories to African women, because when you give those women a chance to make money and support themselves, that money helps an entire community.
Right.
And that the same is true. Women with their children or their family members or parents. And that was where it started, really. And it just kind of continues from there. And so I try to just, wherever I feel like there's a unique story, that's where I pull from. And I really had to stop and say, these women have incredibly compelling stories that they tell, and
no one's hearing them.
And I want to show people this is a part of the world that we need, to learn about, just for the sake of learning about another human experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think in terms of collectors, it's that same issue of access and gatekeeping too, for similar reasons and assumptions, and also not like changing with the times and like being stuck in like a very antiquated mode of like what really a wealthy person can look like right now. And I think it's also been, I think it is tough for Black-owned galleries too, because of that, to also get access and into like there, there's a lot of talk about the inclusion in 2020 and stuff, but that's where, so where's their art fair? This is another great example of it. This is fair is great, right? But like in, as that evolves, where's that access to those exhibitors in certain like more mega fair ways too? Because that's also like, it might not to like trying to choose my words so carefully, like to like an older Swiss gentleman, like their taste is obviously going to be different,
right?
But that doesn't mean only people with their taste should get into the fair.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that one of the books that has sort of shaped the way that I think about these subjects is Aruna de Souza's White Walling, which is a fabulous book that you should all read. But her one of her sort of points or theses, I guess, is that when censorship exists, and we all know what censorship is, but in some ways censorship can be the censoring of what type of audience is being catered to. That there is a if you're implicitly implying what that the audience is a white audience who's coming to see your exhibition, and you're explaining things as if you're explaining it to a white audience, then that in and of itself is sort of a censoring of the sort of audience for your museum. And I think that's a really nuanced way of thinking about it, that you could be inclusive, you could have a diverse group of people on your roster, but if you're framing them for a white eye or a male eye, then you're not you're not going to get you're not going to get the same reflection. But I think that's sort of our time here. I want to include the audience and hear if you've got any questions or even comments. These conversations can become very sort of, I don't know, they can become conversations between the audience and the panelists. So I encourage any sort of reflections, experiences, that sort of thing. Yeah, Parker.
How do you guys deal with, or what are your thoughts on, I want to say male collectors asking for discounts on women artists, but maybe collectors in general asking for discounts on women artists? How do you tackle that in your own galleries and in your own ways?
We, in terms of discounts, like we're, especially right now, we are always, providing access to is always like a big part of it. I mean, it's not exactly to answer your question, but like very, it's right. It's like the finding the right home, and two, like it's asking for 10 versus 25 is where it starts getting disrespectful.
Percent off is what you're saying.
Yeah, and it, 10, 15, but when you start saying like, I'd buy this, but it needs to be a 30% discount, and it's like that's where that's obviously a no. But that's where you start feeling sort of like the disrespect, and I'm doing you a favor. Where like, when you don't want to like, either grovel or be combative, but you're like, you realize you're taking someone's like grocery money away right now.
It's like they need to buy more art supplies.
This
art that we love, so
studio.
That's a large part of it. I think, it to me it is kind of like a matter of respect. I mean, I get it a lot sometimes, especially just starting out. There have been moments where I've had people who weren't very like or they weren't experienced collectors, who come in and they're like, how can we negotiate this? And it's like, we're not talking numbers, we're talking
It's not a merger
someone's
acquisition
livelihood.
deal.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. This is not, if you pay this much, I'll throw in a car freshener. Right. It is, it's like, we have to remember what we're doing here. It's more than just the number here. Think about what the artist gets,
Yes.
but think about what I also have to do to manage overhead,
Yeah.
to make sure that I bring you more amazing artists.
And we're not ripping you off, actually. We're not ripping you off. More likely you're getting ripped off by a male gallerist,
Or a
honestly.
major gallery.
Like,
less
that's his.
likely to-
That's There's no. It's like a very transparent. We're not here because we're here. Everyone's here for a really moral reason, and no one's here to rip someone off. And I think there's a lot of fear with a lot of some of those people that they're need to make sure they're getting
Prove that they have,
Yeah.
you're not pulling a fast one on them.
yeah.
But if you think about it, there are a lot of easier ways to make money than going into the art market to be a dealer. It's like, if you're in it for the money, just, I don't know, go to finance.
Yeah, exactly. Then come collect.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions?
So how do you choose or maintain the balance, the roster of male and female artists typically? And within the female category, is there space for BIPOC artists? And how is that call typically put out?
Well, in terms of our program, we always take our cues from the artists we show. So if an artist we show tells us to look at an artist, that's something we take really seriously. So that's in a lot of ways how the program's been built. And there is no purposefulness. It's just been very, very few. We've just happened to have shown very few straight white men, and that has nothing to do with any rules around that. It's more about I think that it is hard for straight white male artists right now, but it's something about the hiding of vulnerability and not being honest and not being honest in the work. It's something they have to work through. If they, so it takes a really kind of really special guy for us to work with them. And it's just about the kind of work, because we come from a very emotional spot. We want to be emotionally moved by the work. So that's the criteria. And they haven't been meeting that criteria.
Yeah. No, honestly, I thinking, I don't know if I've really showed many, if not any, straight white men. And it's not intentional at all. My focus was the African diaspora, and now it's kind of shifted and including women in general, queer women, women of color. They're absolutely, some of my favorites are absolutely, straight white men. It just, over time it's okay, well, I can't, they're already with a massive gallery because somebody saw them already. But, I have noticed that, there is shifting. There's almost a higher expectation. The people that haven't had their story told, the women, the people of color, the LGBTQ community, their stories are fascinating.
Yeah.
So is your story as fascinating, or is it because you have, you fit within an acceptable criteria that I guess galleries deem easier to work with?
Even though part of my thing though is that I think the person that you work with is so important, because it's a relationship. It's a relationship, and you need to be able to it is a total like working relationship, and it's kind of hard to work with guys sometimes.
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't have much experience in it. I work with women. My whole team is women. I have
I mean,
the privilege of doing that.
I've had people, during shows come up to me and like, well, what about, like, I'm a white man. Like, what about my work? And it's like, go down the street, look at the artist next door. Is that a white man? Look at the one next door. Is that a white man? Likely, yes. You could go there and ask. It's like,
That's Larry.
I'm a very small.
And it's like, stop with
person.
the replacement
Why
theory.
are you asking
like,
me?
It's like, you're going down a very bad path.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That might be our place to end.
Sorry.
We're going down a very bad path, Eden. But absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope the future. I think the future is great.
No, the future. They were going down a bad path. We're going in a good path.
We're going down a good path. Exactly.
If your story is compelling enough, if it's good enough, it connects to enough people,
Exactly.
that's what matters.
Right.
Yes.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Simple. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.